Introduce Dr. Cherry Baylosis from Dana. And Cherry is here to launch the report. And this project has been a deep collaboration, and we're really excited to hear from you, Cherry. So I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and to share what you've learned.
Thank you so much, Mary. Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Cherry Baylosis. So you pronounced my name perfectly, Mary, which does not happen very often. I am the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Disability Advocacy Network Australia. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm dialing in from Gundagara, Darug country. And I saw that there was someone else in the chat dialing in as well. So it's lovely to see some other people dialing in from similar lands. Today we're going through the launch of the report, and I'm delighted to be here to be a part of this, and I'm delighted to see so many researchers are here as well to engage in this information sharing. This project has 4 outputs that I would like to draw your attention to. So we have the main report, and we also have a plain language summary. Importantly, there is an additional report that was led and written by our First Nations lead. And I should point out that the findings and recommendations in the main report are also informed by that. But we worked with the First Nations lead and got their input, and together we decided that it was best as a standalone piece. And then there's a Auslan translation and plain language summary as well. Next slide, please. So about this project, Mary has touched on. It was to explore what advocacy organisations, as well as disability representative and carer organisations, need to partner meaningfully in research. So what do they need? As Mary mentioned, what gets in the way and what enables co-design research? Dana, the Disability Advocacy Network Australia, conducted this research for the NDRP. And I should say the team that worked on this are all people with disability and psychosocial disability that work in the sector. So sorry, I think someone's got their microphone turned on. Yeah. So not only do we have lived experience, but we were all immersed in the disability sector and have been immersed for quite some time. And we have also been involved in co-design research projects. I myself am a MAD studies researcher, which looks at how knowledge is produced in research. So that was important and integral to the research that we were doing. And as Mary pointed out, disability-led research is important from the start. So people with disabilities' voices, their thoughts and views are integrated at the outset. The methods that we used were one-on-one interviews, also working groups and surveys. And the key finding, which we'll go through in today's presentation, is the importance of mutuality, where the partnerships between people that typically do the research benefit, but also, most importantly, so do people with disability and the broader community as well. Next slide, please. So the key findings were, the first one was two-way learning, and this involves a mutual exchange of information. And importantly, it challenges the positioning of the researcher as what historically has been the authoritative and expert person that holds the knowledge, as being equal and acknowledging that people with lived experience, that their knowledge is authoritative knowledge in their own right. And this requires a certain approach and certain practice where researchers must listen through difference. What that means is adopting reflexivity, where people are aware of where differences are, the friction points that it might raise, and even the discomfort. To an extent, it can involve unlearning or being comfortable with seeing the difference and being able to listen through that as well. As I mentioned before, it involves the positioning of the researcher as a learner, and sometimes that can involve having views, knowledge, or the expertise of lived experience challenge what the researcher believes they know and finding common ground to understand what the phenomenon is from a different angle. Importantly, it requires researchers to reflect on their biases in terms of gender, age, or any other parts of their experience or personality that they might be bringing into the interaction of research, and looking at how that might interpret or even the ways that they might behave working with people with disability. And lastly, it also requires, at a bare minimum, that researchers have a trauma-informed approach. And importantly, it's not an overall general trauma-informed, but being trauma-informed about the specific communities and people that you are working with as well. The second key finding was co-design, and co-create. The common language that we often hear is co-design. And as Mary had pointed out in her opening statement, this really involves looking at ways to work together at the outset. At the start, where there is the defining of the problem, and then decisions around how that problem is researched. So looking at different ways in methods and ways of collecting information. And in particular, again, it can sometimes mean challenging ways that data is traditionally collected as well. So some examples that we were given were looking at how art practices can be used to look at ways for people with disability to communicate in ways that they prefer, instead of having them communicate in a way that researchers prefer. So that's one way. And then it also looked at co-facilitation. So as part of that data collection, ensuring that people with disability were part of it, and when appropriate or where possible, that they're actually leading the co-facilitation as well. This is important to achieve what is often called asymmetry, where people with disability are on a more equal level playing field in those types of interactions. We also recommended, as part of this overarching finding, was accessible outputs. So not just doing research together, but looking at how research is shared among the community. So as researchers, many of you would know that accessing journal articles is often behind paywalls. It requires access to certain databases. So making sure that the research output that is delivered through engaging in research is shared with the community in an open way as well. And even leading up to that, making sure that the organisations and people with disability that you engage with have information to so that they can better engage in the process as well. And lastly, the third finding was the distribution of resources, where partnerships require fair sharing of time, money, and data. I think it's fair to assume that our minds can go to the distribution of funding and information. But one thing that I would like to emphasize is the timing and deadlines, which can encompass what we call a normative expectation of how bodies and minds operate. I think this can be one of the greatest pressures that researchers may encounter, because there are deadlines within just our own work as being in researchers. There are deadlines. There are often deadlines for funding. There's deadlines to get reports done, and trying to negotiate those tensions when working with people who can have different paces of working. I myself have an episodic issues of my mind, where sometimes I can work faster or sometimes I need to work more slowly. And sometimes people within my team experience something similar, where they might not be able to produce the same outputs as non-disabled people within a certain time as well. So having some flexibility to be able to accommodate the stretching and contracting of time, particularly when you're working with people that experiences when they might have illness and episodic periods of being able to work at a certain pace. So what does this actually mean in terms of practicality? Next slide, please. So it means having guidelines and tools and developing these with disability representative organisations and disability advocacy organisations. So at a minimum, this includes having trauma-informed training. There are standards as well, which require, for instance, reflexivity. And I'm really pleased to see that the NDRP has toolkits and resources that they are able to share with researchers to inform how they might go about approaching, engaging, and doing the actual co-design work. And again, and also to ensure fair resourcing. So ensure that there is an environmental scan to assess how much funding is required. Look at how co-design research is disseminated. Are there ways in which research can be shared that is not behind a paywall? One of the recommendations that was also made was, if you are an academic institution, giving the same access that you have to databases to the organisations that you have as well. Ensure that you publish timelines and guidelines around that as well, and ensuring, again, that those timeframes include a fair distribution of time. And next slide. So why does this actually matter? So when we consider true co-design, it involves these key ingredients. It involves mutuality, it involves a sharing of power and fair resources. Importantly, it elevates lived experience as authoritative knowledge, and it builds trust and reciprocity in research partnerships. And lastly, it includes a roadmap for inclusive and effective disability research. That is it. Thank you very much. I will hand over back to Mary.
Thank you very much, Cherry, and also thanks you for doing the research, but also all the advocacy organisations that contributed, many of whom I know are online or will be speaking today. So thank you very much, and we're delighted to be launching the report. So the next session, and for those who have just launched, and have we got time for a question? Maybe we might, while you're still on the thing. There was a question, what's one thing that stood out from you from the report, Cherry? Are you happy to answer that question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question, Sally. The one thing that stood out for me was how the findings were reflected in our own experience of doing the research. So as I mentioned before, grappling with the time pressures and grappling with the pacing of the work as well, but also looking at what was going on in the disability sector at the time as well, and having to negotiate the pressures that had on the mind and body. And I think it was fair to assume that, I guess if I had to decide what the findings were, I think sometimes people expect that co-design research would look at what people with disability would need to do, but it really reframed things to look at what do researchers need to do and how can they change to make things more mutual.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And
knowing that you don't know what you don't know is a really good start to being a researcher, because it leads to more questions. In terms of how to do it, looking at who you might approach as the trusted source of information and having an open and frank conversation with them about what is the best way to approach your community as well. So again, coming back to being open to learning, and then going to the source of the expertise. So going to someone in the community and asking them, what do I need to know to make sure that I can do it in a safe way?
Mary speaking. Thank you very much, Cherry, for those taking those questions, and keep your questions coming. They're fantastic.